Dr. Mary C. Neal spent decades immersed in science and medicine. Born and raised in the Midwest, she studied at the University of California at Los Angeles School of Medicine, completed her residency in orthopedic surgery at the University of Southern California, and eventually became chief of spine surgery at the University of Southern California School of Medicine. By the late 1990s, she was living in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, with her husband and children, known as both an accomplished surgeon and an outdoors woman. Her worldview was pragmatic and skeptical. As she later told NBC's Today Show, "I was very analytical, very scientific, and quite skeptical about anything that I couldn't see or measure." But in 1999, during what was meant to be a fun adventure trip to Chile, Mary's clinical certainty about life and death would be shattered. The accident. Trapped beneath the water. In early 1999, Mary joined friends for a kayaking expedition in southern Chile, an area famous for dramatic whitewater rivers fed by Andean snowmelt. Though an experienced kayaker, she was aware of the inherent risk. On that fateful day, her group approached a waterfall known to be challenging but within their skill level. Mary went over first, but her kayak became pinned underwater by the force of the chute. Whitewater kayaking accidents can turn fatal in minutes. Cold water and powerful currents create what paddlers call hydraulics, trapping boats and bodies below the surface. Mary later wrote that she struggled desperately but could not free herself. "I was under for up to 30 minutes, she wrote in To Heaven and Back. "I should have been dead long before they pulled me out." Her friends tried to reach her, forming human chains and using ropes, but the current was too strong. Eventually, they managed to free her body and drag it to shore. By then, Mary was limp, pulseless, and blue, medically dead by conventional definitions. The moment of peace. Leaving the body. What happened while she was submerged is what transformed Mary's life. She remembers the exact instant when panic gave way to profound calm. "As soon as I realized there was no way out, I felt a deep and extraordinary sense of peace, Wayne," she said in interviews. "It was as though I had been completely released from fear." She describes feeling her consciousness rise above her body. From this vantage, she could see her own form still trapped under the water, while she herself seemed unharmed, watching with detachment and love. Then came the light and the beings she could only describe as angels. In her Today Show appearance in 2012, she said, "They were absolutely glorious. They wrapped me in love beyond description. Unconditional, overwhelming love. These presences communicated without words, filling her with comfort and a sense of being deeply known." Such experiences, awareness outside the body, feelings of peace, encounters with luminous beings, are often reported in near-death experience research. But Mary, a physician, had never taken such reports seriously until she lived it herself. Entering the heavenly realm, escorted by these radiant beings, Mary says she was taken to what she calls a heavenly realm. She recounts that the landscape seemed more alive than anything she had ever known. Colors far beyond the earthly spectrum, music that felt alive, and an overwhelming sense of joy and belonging. "It was more real than Earth," she later wrote. "Every color was more vibrant, every sound more harmonious, every sensation more pure than anything I had known." She felt no pain, no longing for her earthly life. Instead, she was surrounded by beauty and an unshakable sense of love and purpose. Meeting Jesus. In this place, Mary says she encountered Jesus. The figure was radiant, personal, and unmistakably loving. "I knew him," she wrote, "not because someone told me who he was, but because my soul recognized him instantly." She describes walking with him in what appeared to be a meadow or path filled with golden light. He spoke to her, not with audible words but directly to her heart, telling her it was not yet her time. "Jesus walked with me," she recalls. "He told me I still had work to do on earth." To Heaven and Back, page 72. Mary says she didn't want to return. After the struggle and pain of drowning, the peace of heaven felt perfect. But Jesus told her life still held purpose. that she would help others through her story and her work, and that she would face future sorrows but be given strength to endure them. Glimpses of the future and a mother's heartbreak. One of the most striking parts of Mary's account is that she was shown glimpses of future events. She says she was told about the later death of her son, something that at the time seemed unthinkable. She was also shown that her medical skills and personal story would bring hope and healing to others. When her teenage son, Willie, died years later in a tragic accident, Mary says the foreknowledge she received gave her both comfort and meaning in the midst of grief. She believes this was part of the mission Jesus spoke of: to trust God even through unbearable loss and to help others face death with faith rather than fear. Returning to a broken body. While this transcendent experience unfolded, her friends were still fighting to revive her earthly body. After nearly 30 minutes underwater, far beyond the typical limit for survival, they finally freed her and performed CPR. Miraculously, she began to breathe again. The physical recovery was intense. Mary had sustained lung injury, broken bones, and other trauma from the accident, but what surprised her most was the spiritual aftershock. She returned utterly changed, convinced that life continues after death and that love is the ultimate reality. Life after death and after doubt. Before the accident, Mary's faith had been casual and intellectual at best. Afterward, it became experiential and unshakable. She describes a permanent loss of fear about death, a new compassion for patients facing terminal diagnoses, and a desire to share hope beyond the limits of science. In her medical practice, she became known for listening deeply to patients, sometimes even praying with them, something she never would have done before. She also began speaking publicly about her experience, though reluctantly at first. "I was nervous about my colleagues thinking I'd lost my scientific mind," she admits. But the impact of her testimony soon outweighed her fears. Her memoir, To Heaven and Back, a doctor's extraordinary account of her death, heaven, angels, and life. Again, Waterbrook Press, 2012, became a New York Times bestseller. She has since appeared on major media outlets, from The Today Show to Fox News, and various faith-based conferences, sharing her story with audiences worldwide. Near-death experience research and medical perspective. Mary's account has drawn interest not just from Christian audiences, but also from researchers studying near-death experiences. While skeptics point out that oxygen deprivation and brain chemistry may create hallucinations, Mary, as a surgeon familiar with how the brain responds to trauma, insists her experience was unlike any physiological phenomenon. She notes that her memory was crystal clear, her perception vivid, and that the peace and love she felt were utterly unlike the agitation and confusion expected in hypoxia. Low oxygen. In interviews, she says, "If it had been the dying brain, I would have expected fear, disorientation, and panic. Instead, I was more conscious and alive than ever." NDE researchers have documented many similar elements: out-of-body awareness, encounters with deceased loved ones or divine figures, feelings of peace, and life reviews. Mary's story fits these patterns while also having unique features, such as her detailed premonition about her son's death. A message of hope and purpose. Today, Mary speaks internationally to medical groups, churches, grief conferences, and secular audiences. Her message is not that death should be sought or feared, but that life has purpose and love outlasts our physical existence. She encourages people to live courageously, care for one another, and trust that death is not the end. Heaven is real and Jesus is alive, she says simply. A striking confession from someone once trained to believe only what could be dissected or proven in a lab. Her story has inspired thousands struggling with grief, terminal illness, or fear of dying. Letters pour in from people who say her book helped them face loss with hope. Controversy and faith. Not everyone accepts Mary's account at face value. Some scientists caution that NDES can be shaped by culture and belief systems. Others note that 30 minutes underwater is medically astonishing and suggest there may be gaps in timing. Mary herself does not claim her story as a scientific proof of heaven, only a personal, life-altering reality. She continues to embrace both her medical background and her faith, seeing them as complementary. Science can describe the mechanics of life, she says, but it doesn't explain love, hope, or the soul. A life rewritten. It has been more than 2 decades since that day in Chile. Dr. Mary C. Neal still lives in Wyoming, practices medicine, and shares her experience with humility. Her life's arc, from skeptical surgeon to messenger of hope, reflects a profound shift born from one extraordinary moment when death gave way to life. For readers and listeners, whether devout, doubtful, or curious, her story invites wonder. What if consciousness continues? What if love is the deepest reality? What if our lives, even the painful chapters, carry eternal meaning? Mary does not insist that everyone believe. She only shares what she experienced. I drowned. I met Jesus. I came back forever changed. If this story moved you, don't forget to hit that like and make sure to subscribe. Thank you for watching, and remember, every life has purpose and love is stronger than death.